Now Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Last week was the 5th anniversary of January 6th, an event which will forever dominate my thinking about my experience in the Senate. I was on the floor of the Senate, as were most of the senators here today, when we were asked to leave by the Capitol Police as quickly as possible. We filed out and went to a secure location. We saw just the fringes of the mob, the insurrectionist mob that had gathered at the Capitol. Do you know what Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, said after that event? He said, "There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of that day." That's a quote from Mitch McConnell. But Senate Republicans failed ever to hold Trump accountable when they had a chance. He was acquitted and immediately began plotting a return to power, aided and abetted by many Republican senators who'd been asked to evacuate the chamber on January 6th. During his campaign, President Trump promised, quote, retribution. He made good on his promise. Throughout his second term, Donald Trump has used the justice system as a shield for his cronies and a sword to attack his opponents. On his first day back in office, first day as president in the second term, President Trump issued a full, unconditional pardon of nearly 1,600 January 6 rioters, including more than 600 charged with assaulting or impeding law enforcement. It is the largest exoneration of a group of cop beaters in the history of the United States, and it was issued by President Trump on his first day of his second term. Their violent assaults against police officers resulted in injuries to more than 140 police officers, including traumatic brain injuries and smashed spinal disc. Next, Trump's political appointees led an unprecedented purge of dozens of career prosecutors and FBI agents who simply did their jobs and investigated and prosecuted this attack on the Capitol. Who replaced these dedicated public servants? People like Kash Patel, who called violent January 6 rioters, and I quote, political prisoners, and produced the so-called January 6 prison choir, which included many rioters who had violently assaulted police officers. And people like Ed Martin, who tweeted from the U.S. Capitol on January 6, and I quote, like Mardi Gras in D.C. today, love, faith, and joy, ignore fake news. Mr. Martin dismissed violence by January 6 rioters, saying, quote, listen to this quote, we have to have less judgment on somebody who hits a cop, close quote. And then there's the pardoned January 6 rioter, Jared Weiss. Attorney General Bondi hired Jared Weiss, a pardoned January 6 rioter, even though he was filmed urging his fellow rioters to kill police officers, those who were defending the Capitol. He shouted, quote, yeah, F him. Yeah, kill him. I guess that qualified him to serve in the Department of Justice to this president. But today we have a new recruit to the January 6 Dream Team, Darren Smith, nominated to be U.S. Attorney for Wyoming before this committee. This is a special nominee. You would never have considered voting for this man if he were nominated by a Democratic president. Never considered. Mr. Smith has zero experience, civil or criminal experience in court. But he was on the Capitol grounds January 6th. Mr. Smith of Wyoming has made the reprehensible claim that hundreds of Capitol police officers who risked their lives for us that day were guilty of, quote, massive incompetence, in his words. I'll have more to say about him later when his name comes up. Last week on the riot's 5-year anniversary, the White House published a revisionist history of January 6th. Like the Soviet Union, they're trying to rewrite history and write out of history the reality of January 6th. And like Darren Smith, the White House blames Capitol Police for the violence. How shameful. The White House claimed law enforcement who bravely defended us and our staff and visitors, quote, aggressively fired tear gas, flashbangs, and rubber munitions into crowds of peaceful protesters, injuring many and deliberately escalating tension, and, quote, turning a peaceful demonstration into chaos. We've all seen the videos Will even one Republican senator condemn these despicable lies? When Donald Trump isn't whitewashing January 6th, he's targeting communities that didn't vote for him, like Chicago and Los Angeles and Minneapolis. Instead of deporting the worst of the worst as promised, the Trump administration is rounding up tens of thousands of immigrants or people who look like immigrants with no criminal history. Judge Cummings, district court judge in the Northern District of Illinois, at one point asked ICE and DHS to produce a list of those who had been detained in the first round of Operation Midway Blitz. They produced a list of more than 600 names. Remember our targets? Our targets in this were made clear by the president over and over again. We're going after terrorists, criminals, all those who engaged in criminal conduct. That's what it was all about. So out of the 600, how many do you think had a criminal record of any kind? 6. 16 out of 600. 16 out of 600. 97% of those who were detained had no criminal record, and included in that list American citizens that ICE had detained in Chicago. 97%, no criminal record whatsoever. Instead of deporting the worst of the worst, they're creating a reign of terror in the African and the Hispanic communities in Chicago. You would think at some point in time this committee would have Secretary Noem before us. She's received more money than anyone in the history of that department, billions of dollars. She has now authorized the creation of tens of hundreds of new ICE agents who attack these communities. You'd think you had a few questions. There might be a few questions in Judiciary Committee. She had no time in the last calendar year to appear here. What's the history of the committee? History of the committee is this agency, DHS, is our responsibility. We're the ones who are supposed to hold this hearing. She's been too busy to attend. And I understand her complaint is if she comes, she can only come for an abbreviated period of time, limited questions. She doesn't have enough time to bother with this committee. That is an insult to every single one of us, Republicans and Democrats. And I want to tell you point blank, she's got the time and needs to be held accountable for what's happening with that agency. We have problems in cities across America where they've descended upon them, and I happen to represent one of them in Chicago. When I was chair of this committee, it was my job to call Secretary Mayorkas and give him the bad news. He had to appear every year before this committee. 10-minute rounds of questions. I told him it would be the worst day of his life, but he had to do it. He had a legal, moral, and constitutional responsibility. Secretary Noem does not believe she has that responsibility. It's about time for her to come and for us to accept our responsibility to ask questions. Mr. Chairman, I know you've been pushing on this issue, so I'm not pointing to you individually, but I do want to tell you, it is time for Secretary Noem to come or to step down from this position. I yield the floor.
Before we go to the vote, and everybody's here so we can have the votes, but you bring up an appropriate issue. As I said in my last statement before our Christmas break, that we had asked her to come twice, and we're asking her to come again. I think we're making great progress. I don't have a final decision for you, but I know that we've gotten their attention by talking to the press because they're irritated because I've been the press has asked me about her appearance and I've talked about it and things of that nature, but I think I'll have to just leave it this way. We're making progress.
Mr. Chairman, am I mistaken? Do we have the power to subpoena this witness if she will not appear voluntarily?
Yeah, as long as you agree with me.
I certainly do, and I want to make a record publicly right now. If she doesn't affirmatively agree to a specific date for a full interrogation, 10-minute rounds, I believe she should be subpoenaed, and I would make that motion to this committee the next time we meet.
Now we'll go to Daniel Burrows. On favorably reporting the nomination, the clerk will call the roll.
Aye.